Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Let's Be About It. I'm Amanda Briggs.
And I'm Alan Blair.
We're here to lead personal and authentic conversations about all the tough and messy stuff in life.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate you joining us.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of this mini-series we are doing for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. It's April of 2023, and the last podcast release, I told my story, and this week Alan is going to share his story. And it's so important, it's so impactful what Alan has to share today, because I've been doing work in this field for 17 years. Alan, I think you're 20 some odd years.
Yeah.
So between the two of us, yeah, like almost 40 years. And I've never heard someone share a story from your perspective before, especially the way you do. So especially for Sexual Assault Awareness Month, or SAAM, just very excited to have you share. Can you do a little setup just so people know what to expect in terms of sensitive topics and stuff for us this week?
Absolutely. So the topic that I'm going to be talking about, it could definitely be difficult for some. So we just want to put that out there. But it's a very real example dealing with a sexual assault and just kind of how that was handled. And again, this will be told from a different perspective. Amanda did a great job of sharing a personal experience and spend time talking about, that response piece of it and how some people definitely responded in completely the wrong way. And from my perspective, sometimes you respond. I'll be speaking about a situation in which I responded just out of complete shock and not really fully understanding or being aware or even think that I would be placed in that situation. And kind of like Amanda has spoke. So I've spent 17 years working with adults who have experienced sexual assault, and but I spent 3 years working with minors that had been sexually assaulted, abused, physically abused, so on and so forth. So in total, it's about 20 years working in this field. And I actually started working in the field of sexual assault because of an incident that took place back in high school. And I was a bystander to a sexual assault, and I was in a position to do something, and I didn't. And I always told myself if I was ever in a position to do something, I would. And I was given that opportunity to work in this capacity full time when I was in the military back in 2005. And then 2005 in the Air Force, the sexual assault program had just began. And I had heard about this job opening up. And I'm like, this is my opportunity to give back, if, as they say, try to right the wrong. And when I first started working this field, I mean, I received all type of roadblocks. I was like, nope, you can't do this. No, you can't do this work. You are a male. The last thing that a woman who's been sexually assaulted, you're the last person that they would want to talk to. And I completely understood that. But I'm like, then there has to be some workaround, because I feel like me being a male that I need to work in this field and I need to try to make a difference. One, to help prevent it, but two, I do want to be that male role model to show whoever the survivors or victims are, whether they're male or female, that not all males are this way. But I also had read the description and they said that I could hire a person. So in my mind, I would hire a female for those victims who came to me who were not comfortable speaking to me, but I would have a female victim advocate. And at that time, they had a slightly different role, but a female that they could talk to. So anyway, after pouring out my heart and like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. This is why I want to work in this field. Eventually, they gave me the opportunity, and I was, one of the first males to work in this field, in the Air Force when they first stood up the program. So this is how I entered the program, and my mindset is that I am going into this because I definitely want to make a difference. And my focus has always been particularly even more at that time, but it always been, what can I do to help that survivor?
Mhm.
And I also, as I was getting more and more educated, but, initially I really thought that, most survivors of sexual assault are females, which most of the time that is the case. I also could care less about what would happen to the perpetrators. I was like, perpetrators. I mean, because sometimes when I would go to trainings, a person would pull me to the side. Hey, I can tell you how to solve that problem. How about we just kill all these perpetrators, or how about we do these horrible things, as if that was going to be the answer. But bottom line is that,
Let's meet violence with violence.
yes, and in my mind, it was like, I really had no care in the world for a perpetrator. If they committed this crime, then they deserved exactly what they got. So that was my mindset. But I was full speed ahead again, taking care of survivors and also doing what I can to prevent. So I'm doing these trainings and I'm educating and I'm talking to these men, trying to give them a different perspective. I'm talking to the women. I'm talking to everybody, anybody who's willing to listen. I am talking, and I am making a case, making sure that people got the help that they need, making sure we're preventing it. So again, that's my mission. This is the work that I'm doing. Now, I had a brother who lived about 3.5 hours away. Brother, that this is somebody I'd looked up to since we were kids, and he and I, we were about a little over 18 months apart. But this guy has always been my role model, the guy that I always wanted to be like. And there's so many stories of how I just wanted to emulate him. Now, he was a pretty amazing football player. He was number one. He was an amazing athlete in general. But this guy was funny. Everybody loved being around him. And growing up, I was kind of a quiet, shy guy, so I would kind of hang around him and his friends and just kind of be in a presence. And, everybody liked him. And so I just like being around him, being around his friends, being in that group. And when my brother played football, I went to play football just like him. I would try to wear the same number. When he was playing basketball, even in middle school, high school, I looked up to him. Fast forward to us now being adults. I'm in the military. He's a youth pastor in a town about 3.5 hours away. And he contacted me like, "Hey, Alan, hey, I've got this group. I want you to come down and speak to my youth group." And I'm like, "What do you want me to speak to them about?" He's like, "Hey, whatever's on your heart, whatever you could think of, just come down and share." And I'm like, "Okay." So I was having trouble trying to think about, okay, what am I going to go around there and talk to them about, And I couldn't come up with anything. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna go down and whatever comes to my mind, I guess that's what that's what I'm gonna talk about. And I just want to let you know, as I'm telling this story, I've only told this story one time before, so it may be a little difficult for me at times. So just please bear with me.
And we'll just keep this the same as everything. Casual coffee conversation with friends. Do
Absolutely,
your thing. We
yes.
got you.
And so when he contacted me, when he made the initial ask, and I was having trouble coming up with what I was going to talk about, I remember the morning of when I was going to drive down, and that evening was when I was supposed to speak. So the morning of, I take a look at my phone and I get this text message. It said, "I no longer want to be here. I messed up. My life is ruined." I'm like, "What?" And it was from him. I'm like, okay, what the heck is going on? So I text back. I don't get a response. I pick up and I try to call and I don't get a response. So I'm like, what the heck is going on? And then maybe 5 minutes later, I get a phone call from my sister in law, his wife, and she tells me that, hey, your brother's fine. He's not in any physical harm, or there's not a medical situation take place, but he really needs you. Can you get here as soon as possible? So I said, okay. So got in my car, drove down. It was about a 3.5 hour drive. And when I was going into town, I'm like, hey, I'm going into town. Where do I need to go? So I was sent an address, and it was to an attorney's office. So I arrived at the attorney's office, and a friend of my brother and his family met me in a parking lot and kind of gave me a brief description, or a heads up of what was going on and what was taking place. So I'll walk in there. So they were talking to the attorney, and um, eventually we leave and we go to, uh, and I'm trying to think. We went to, um, where did we go? Okay, trying to get my thoughts together where we
Yeah,
went
just the
first.
details.
And when I arrived there, some things took place. Um, my brother ended up going. Then we ended up leaving, going to a hotel where he was staying, and I was there watching my brother lay on the bed in a fetal position, just crying and crying and crying. Um, the next day,
Were you on suicide watch through that
and
period?
that's exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my brother was going through a situation that was known throughout the city the next day, because the headlines on the front paper was that youth pastor has sex with underage girl. And we were at a point in which my brother was to found in a situation in which he had sex with a 15-year-old girl that was one of the individuals in his youth group. And my mind ain't working very good right now, Amanda, by the way.
Well, I mean, that is such a tough scenario, like, it's your life's work to fight against this, and then
Absolutely.
your hero ends up perpetrating a crime that goes against everything you believe in and have dedicated your professional energy to.
Absolutely. And it was so hard for me to wrap my mind around it, because this is a person that I've spent my life up to that point looking up to. Not only as a kid did I look up to him, but even as an adult, because of the things he was doing. He went to college, played
Mhm.
football at college. Now he was a coach and also this youth pastor. And I'm like, man, this is someone I want to be exactly like. So to
Mhm.
have this image of him, and really looking up to him as, at that point in time, as my hero, but seeing
Mhm.
him in that fetal position, and how he was struggling and crying and contemplating suicide, it was that day was one of the most difficult days of my life. And it was something
Mhm.
that I just didn't know how to respond to. I didn't know how to respond to it because, as I was talking earlier, I'm used
Mhm.
to being there for victims or survivors of sexual assault. I'm used to not caring what happened to a perpetrator of sexual assault. I could actually care less. But now, this image that I had in my head of what a perpetrator was, because most of the time when I would hear the term perpetrator, I'm thinking about somebody who would molest kids, or somebody who was doing some of these horrible things to the survivors that I was helping and assisting. So that was my viewpoint. But never in a million years could I imagine or place that title on my brother, or this hero, this person who was doing so many amazing things and was impacting so many people, impacting so many youth. It was just so difficult for me. And not only did I have to accept the fact that, man, my brother has committed this horrible crime, but also seeing him in such a vulnerable position. And now me having to be there for him as his support system was just really, 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 really difficult for me at that time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm just trying to process. I mean, I'm having a hard time kind of getting my thoughts together, but just being in that position,
Mhm.
because it was so difficult for so many reasons. Because as I'm training and as I'm teaching, even some of these
Mhm.
how to go about preventing this from happening, or signs to look for, or certain
Mhm.
things to do for risk reduction,
Mhm.
and to think about all the work that I'm doing. But here it is, somebody that I love now has committed this crime. So it
Mhm.
was just something that was difficult.
Yeah, and this I know it's okay. It's okay that you're having trouble getting your thoughts around it and verbalizing all of this because it's hard and it's painful. And the thing I see in you is still that heartbreak around it, as you talk about it. Like, how did this happen? How could this happen? And so often in our field, the field you and I live and work and breathe in, we expect that from the parents or siblings or friends, loved ones of a survivor. And we sit with them in that heartbreak, and we sit with them in that grief and the how did this happen. And I'm the same as you in terms of my professional work in this field has been directed toward victims and victims' loved ones. And when you shared that story with me, it just when you and I'm grateful you did feel you could open up to me and share this story because it just puts such a spotlight on how much bigger the harm is than most of us even stop to think about. Like the heartbreak that girl experienced, or her parents, her friends, her family experienced, like that's real. The heartbreak you and your mom and your siblings experienced was also real. And you were also innocent victims of what happened, and suddenly you're having to grapple with this person you love, respect, trust, admire, a leader in his community, all of these things committed a crime that goes against everything you stand for. But he's your brother. And in our field, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that at all, which is why I'm so proud of you for having the courage to share your story because there's real hurt happening to real humans who know and love someone who perpetrates a sex crime. And they need as much love and support and compassionate response as the victims' friends and families need.
Absolutely. And in this situation, and just like what you said, the impact is so far reaching. It's one thing when
Mhm.
you think about sexual assault, you think about those that are impacted is that survivor, that victim, the people that
Mhm.
surround that victim. And you know that there's a
Mhm.
perpetrator who's been impacted, because hopefully that perpetrator is going to go through some type of legal system to pay the
Mhm.
price or receive the consequences for that action. So a lot of times when people
Mhm.
think about sexual assault, that's what they think about. But
Mhm.
rarely do we think about that perpetrator has people around them. That perpetrator may have kids, mother, father, siblings, other people that love him or her. But what is that impact on them? Because
Mhm.
everyone around that perpetrator, I mean, they did nothing wrong, and sometimes is guilty by association, and then, that's
Yeah.
kind of a whole other topic. But then when you're placed
Mhm.
in a position like I was placed in, I mean, I love my brother, and the decision he made and the impact of that decision and the devastation that it caused put me in a situation didn't mean that I love my brother any less, but man, it was just an internal struggle of wow, I see this so differently now.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding this impact over here, understanding that my brother was going to have to suffer the consequences for his action, and
Mm-hmm.
knowing that, but not in a situation in which, kind of like you talked about earlier with your family and your brother in the previous podcast, because in that
Mm-hmm.
situation, brother did something so horrible, but your parents sided with him as opposed to siding with you and causing
Mm-hmm.
you so much pain and trauma, but protecting him. Like with my brother, I knew that he was going to have to suffer the consequences, and I knew the impact that it caused. But I still
Mm-hmm.
love my brother, and I was still there for my brother. Uh, Not
Mm-hmm.
saying he didn't do this or he doesn't deserve, some of the things that are coming his way, but it just made it difficult because it was no longer just a term perpetrator, but it was my brother. I love my brother, and
Mm-hmm.
understanding that made a horrible decision.
Yeah. And that's something that I think is so impactful in such a positive way about your story is, in the previous podcast, we did talk about my family and how they completely dropped the ball with accountability and supported my brother. Whereas something your family did was accept and allow and not impede the process of accountability in his situation. And I can say this, as a survivor of sexual assault, I I don't need people to hate their brother. I didn't need my other siblings to hate Andy. I didn't need my parents to hate him. I didn't need my relatives to hate him. I didn't even need them to cut him out of their lives. I needed them to acknowledge truth and support accountability and justice. And I think that that's something your family did very well. And I know you've told me in conversations we've had, like, y'all knew accountability was coming, like it was in the newspapers. So a very different piece between your story and my story. But y'all didn't, like, my family actively tried to stop the process of accountability and justice. Your family actively supported the process of accountability and justice, and you did your best to love and support your brother while he reaped the consequences of his actions and his crimes. And there's so much honor in that, for your family, for you, and for how you guys handled that, because that's an impossible situation. These things, when they happen in families in particular, it's an impossible situation that we all just kind of have to figure out somehow. And yeah, sure, there are best practices and that stuff you and I talk about all the time, but that doesn't change in here how hard it is to, in one hand, hold justice and accountability, and in another hand, hold love and concern.
Absolutely. And the difficulty in this situation, and one reason I'm coming forward and speaking, and it was something that I actually wanted to speak about when I was working in the
Uh-huh.
realm, working with sexual assault survivors, working in a sexual assault prevention and response program uh,
In the
in the
military.
military.
Mhm.
Something I wanted to speak about, but then there was a difficulty. There was difficulty for two reasons. Uh, this was something that my brother had experienced, but as he's moving forward with his life, I didn't want it to be a constant reminder. As he's moving forward, his family's moving forward, then there's this constant reminder that this is something, and in the negativity that comes with that. So I didn't want that to happen, and I had a conversation with him, and he said, if by telling this story, if it could help anyone, then please go for it, and he'll deal with the consequences. So I've got a tremendous amount of respect for him. The other piece of it, I wanted to kind of talk about this, but I didn't want it to appear, as I was working with survivors of sexual assault, and for them to think, okay, oh, you're supposed to be here helping me, but man, you've got this sympathy, or you feel they may feel as if I'm siding with the perpetrators, and I'm not there for survivors of sexual assault. So I was concerned with that being another reason
Mhm.
why I didn't go forward and start, kind of telling this story, because it is so important for people to truly understand that there's this other realm, or this other group of people that are impacted by sexual assault,
Yeah.
that people just don't realize. They just don't understand that
We
full
don't think
impact.
about.
You don't, because
Yeah.
most people don't see that. But when you see
Yeah.
how many sexual assaults that are taking place, and I know that not all perpetrators are held accountable. In your
Yeah.
situation, you can attest to that. But there are a
Mhm.
number of situations in which people are held accountable. And with them being held accountable, we've got so many people that have been impacted or have been affected
Mhm.
just by association,
Mhm.
whether they're a family member, a coworker, or a friend of that perpetrator, but they have been
Mhm.
impacted as well. And again, so
Mhm.
many just don't realize, but some of these people need help too. These people may need
Yeah.
counseling or assistance of figure out
Yeah.
how do they move forward with their lives.
Yeah. And even now, so one of the training seminars that Alan and I love to do is around this concept of total impact of sexual assault. And we really delve into this topic in a much deeper way than we can do in a podcast, but part of our work around that is researching this lost demographic. That's kind of what we call it between the two of us when we're working on this project is yeah, our lost demographic of people who need care in the aftermath of a sexual assault. So as we start to we have a survey out there where we're collecting data on folks who know or love or worked with someone who committed a sex crime. And one of the questions we ask is, did anyone reach out to you in any meaningful way to offer you help? And so far, we've only got one person who said yes. All the rest were no. We're asking them about mental health care in the aftermath. Like, did they seek it? Did they feel safe to seek it? Were they considered guilty by association? And we'll share more about that research as we get more information back. But so far, overwhelmingly, this is a very lost demographic in terms of advocacy and response and care and compassion. And they're just kind of left to flounder through this heartbreak. And Alan, I see you nodding like that resonates for your experience.
Absolutely, because I'm just thinking, when I used to do a lot of work with the local rape crisis here, they did a great job of not only providing counseling and assistance for that survivor victim, but man, they had
Mhm,
wraparound care for family members, that secondary
mhm,
trauma. So they did a great
mhm,
job of taking care of that supportive system of that survivor, that
mhm,
victim. But when you look
mhm.
on the other hand, and the experience that I went through, even siblings of I mean, there was nothing. There was no, hey, are y'all okay? Or who do I contact? Or just a
Mhm.
emotional. I mean, there was nothing. There was
Yeah.
so it's people are needing assistance, and people are needing help. And I think that counseling or some type of therapy is critical for anybody who's going through any type of trauma. But
Yeah.
there's this lost demographic that needs it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the other powerful things about you using your voice in this story, even though this is new and sometimes hard still to talk about, the last podcast we did and the podcast before that, we talked about the power of one person speaking up,
Yes.
one person saying, "Hey, this happened. I survived this thing." And the just immediate trickle effect of one voice saying, "This is a thing that is true." And so when I see you talk about this, and when I see you get up in front of our um, attendees when we do these seminars and stuff, and I see just how the light bulb goes on for people as you introduce them to this concept that there's more. There are more people who are hurt. there are more people who are impacted by one sexual assault than we ever stop to think about. You are moving the field of advocacy forward so much. One voice, one story. You're creating so many opportunities for people to expand their mindset around the concept of sexual assault and the amount, well, on one hand, the amount of harm that's done is not just the victim and their loved ones, it's everyone on the perpetrator side of the fence too. So you're really shining a light on just the total harm and how horrendous a single sexual assault is, but also just you're shining a light on the need for the field of advocacy and response to expand its mindset
Yes.
around this issue. One voice, one story. You're doing that. And I applaud you for that. I'm so proud of you for being willing to talk about this. I know it's hard.
Thank you. And kind of like you said, a voice, but it takes a voice to turn into voices. And when we start having
Mhm.
voices that come together and really give voice to an issue, then that's what we need to pretty much start a movement in making sure that things that need to be taken care of are taken care of. And I can say
Mhm.
this is not something I enjoy talking about. It's not something that I am even comfortable talking about, but it is something that I feel is needed. And as long as it's needed and as long as it helps, then I will make my way, fumble my way through the story to be in order to get it out to simply make a difference.
And it's giving people permission to tell their story too. Like you said, one voice turns into voices, and something you and I talk a lot about is normalization.
Yes.
And I don't think anyone's out there normalizing that it's okay to love someone who perpetrates harm while also promoting accountability and justice.
Hmm.
And just, that, and also just normalizing how hard it is when someone you love commits a sex crime.
Yeah.
And that it's okay for that to be a sticky, messy, painful situation. It is. There's no way around it. Like, it just is. It's sticky, messy, painful, horrible, awful. And I think that as more and more people hear your story, they'll start telling their stories too. And like you said, it would turn into a movement eventually. And we need that movement. We do.
Because there's a need out there that has to be met. And we can't continue the way things are. And I don't want anybody else to be in a position that me and my family were in, or the position that so many more families are in. And as they try to get
Mhm.
help, get through this, and they just don't
Mhm.
know how, and I gave mention to this in the last podcast that part of the work that I do is with young adults between the ages of 18 and 24. And some of these young adults have had absolutely horrible things that have happened to them. And as they try to move forward and literally fight for their lives, many of them have been victims of sexual assault. Some of them are perpetrators of sexual assault. And in the role that I'm in, I'm providing assistance and help to anyone who comes here. And in the topic that we're talking about today, I think it's important to figure out in a way how to even provide, help when it's really difficult, whoever it is that you're helping, if that makes sense. Like I
Yeah.
say, it's different with my brother because I love him and I'm gonna be there for him to get through that. And as I think about, and what I want to express is that I'm not here to say, hey, everybody, you should feel sorry for perpetrators, and that's not what I'm doing. But I'm just
Yeah.
providing the reality of the devastation, what takes place, and just some of the
Mhm.
needs that I see on a daily basis. It's just
Mhm.
tough. Bottom line, to see the complete devastation of a sexual assault.
So, if what would it have been helpful to have someone say to you during that time? Like, what do you wish someone had been there to just speak to you during that
I
time?
think it would have been very helpful to have been prepared for, one, what's to come. Somebody, again, this wasn't the first time a sexual assault happened, family member being a perpetrator, but for someone to have the knowledge to even talk to my family like, hey, this is going to be difficult. These are some of the things that you may feel. You may feel guilt, or people may make you feel like you're dirty, or kind of guilt by association, or people will say
Mhm.
some of these
Mhm.
negative things, or just
Mhm.
help prepare us mentally as a team to really to figure out a way to get through this and have someone to talk to. And
Mhm.
when certain things are taking place, or um yeah, just preparation, I guess would have been a great start if someone would have just helped us with that, and helped us with the questions, and helped us to deal with some of the negative aspects that came our way
Mhm.
as a result. And even though we did nothing wrong.
Okay, so preparation. So for instance, in your story, you pull up to that lawyer's office, right? Someone comes out, briefs you, this is what happened. You walk into that lawyer's office. And I'm guessing it was all like, okay, here's what's going to happen with um being arraigned and, bail, arrests,
Absolutely.
all that kind of stuff. And so it was just very, I'm going to sound very military here, but like tactical. Here's exactly what's going to happen to your brother.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Okay. So at that juncture, if someone in an advocacy role had been there to be like, "Okay, cool, your brother's got the lawyer, we're gonna gather all the family over here. And okay, so it's probably gonna be in the press. Here's what people are probably gonna say. Um, here's what you like need to keep the kids away from the TV, the Facebook, whatever." And then also just talk you through like
Just to have that person,
understand.
Amanda, just to
Yeah,
have
just
that
like even just a
person.
human who cared
Yes,
about you guys. Just a
absolutely.
human who cared about you guys
And
would have been
and that being the start of it. Just, hey, this is what's
okay.
gonna happen if you need me. And then all the questions, all the things that happen after that, to be able to
Mhm.
go to that person. And then
Mhm.
even, mentally, it was really difficult. I mean, it was really difficult
Mhm.
dealing with seeing him in that state, or suicidal. It's like, I've been
Mhm.
through assist training, or the training that we received in the
Yes.
military, but this
Yes.
looks different. This looks
I'm
different.
having a brainwave. I'm having a brainwave, Alan. So when I got my PTSD diagnosis, like we talked about in the previous podcast, I was literally handed a list of psychologists who took my insurance and who specialized in my stuff.
Wow.
So a list, like that's another
Wow.
thing, right? Like here's a list, and then we need qualified therapists, who specialize in this kind of thing. But like, here's a list for, oh, what kind of insurance do you have? Cool. Here's a piece of paper with everyone who accepts your insurance, who is skilled in helping families navigate this
Yes.
bloodbath.
Yes.
Like, yeah. Or here's a support group, or, you know, here's the name of a social worker who specialize like
Because, Amanda, because that's
resources.
what I was used to giving. As working with
Yes, I
survivors of sexual
know.
assault,
I know.
they come to
I
me.
know.
I've got these resources. What you need? Do you need speak to the
Mhm.
investigators? Do you need speak to a
Mhm.
counselor? Do you need this? Do you
Here's
need
the
that?
medical, yeah.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
I'm prepared to
Yeah.
assist.
Ooh,
But when we came in this situation, it was like
there was
there was
nothing.
absolutely
There was no
nothing.
person, there was no piece of paper, there were no
No
resources, there was
guidance.
no blueprint.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like
Maybe we need to
you were left to kind of flounder and kind of try to
yeah.
figure it out the best that we could, but that
Yeah.
it wasn't sufficient.
Yeah. Hmm. Well, now our viewers just get to see us brainstorming how we're going to help the world next. But I do think that that's an important thing to try to stand up as part of this movement. So if you're listening to this and Alan's story resonates with you, please get in touch with us. Leave a comment. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn. We have our website. You can contact us through that. If you want to be part of this movement that Alan's talking about, where we actually make sure that people have resources to help get through the trauma of a loved one or a respected boss or colleague. Like, it doesn't even have to be a family member, just someone that is close enough to you that you are devastated when they make a horrible decision or commit a crime. Like, join the movement. Let's get something started. Let's figure out how to get resources into those people's hands in a timely manner, in an effective manner, so that these, like, because cycles, that can start such a horrible cycle for someone. Like, you had resources within yourself to know how to cope with trauma, but so many people, like, that's not something we're born with. Like, here's the blueprint for how to handle trauma. Good luck, kid. Most of us have to figure it out and flounder our way through it. And let's cut down the flounder. Like, enough of us have been through this. We don't need the flounder. We have people. We just need to get all of our brains together and figure out how to make this happen.
I mean, I love your call to action, because kind of like with this podcast, we don't want to just talk about it, we want to be about it.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
just talked about a need that's out there, so why not try to figure out a way to meet that need? And
Yeah.
it may not have been there for me, but I definitely hope that we'll be able to feel that need for somebody in the future. So I look forward to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And for real, get in touch with us if you've got ideas or want to be part of it. We're not going to stop here, right, Alan?
That's
We're
right.
going to keep pressing until we
Absolutely.
get the field of advocacy to get that total wraparound care for everyone who is impacted by sexual assault.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it. We're looking forward to it. We're looking forward to receiving your help in this venture, and let's make a difference together.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for joining us again today, and we'll see you next month with the next episode. Thanks so much for spending your time with us today. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a review. You know the drill.
Until next time, let's not just talk about it, let's be about it.